Not only do we want more debates, and we have to have debates, but we want them, as you just pointed out, sooner. The reality is, if you look at the debate schedule right now, the first debate is scheduled for the middle of September. Millions of people, Sean, are going to already have voted because the first day of early voting starts at the beginning of September in a lot of states. You need the ability to compare these two men, their presidencies, their vision for the future of this country on a stage in real time, with no buffer of the media, with no people surrounding you as you're walking to Marine One. You need the cold, hard truth here.
All right, folks, never a quiet week in the world of politics. So much that happened this week. You think about all the stuff that went on at college campuses. Marjorie Taylor Greene's threatening to go after Speaker Johnson. That's going to happen next week. I'll talk about that later because obviously that'll come up. Trump back in the courtroom. So much happening on that front. What else did I miss? The Biden administration changing the schedule on pot because they are have some problems with young voters. Let's not let that go away. Obviously, continue to see issues on the border, although that's taken a back seat, unfortunately, which bums me out. So much happening. But as we look ahead to next week, as I said, Lara Trump coming up in just a minute. Great conversation, I think, in store with her about her new role at the RNC. Well, let me get to that in a second. Before I do, though, next week, Victor Davis Hanson is going to be joining us. Kimberly Guilfoyle is going to be joining us, and a lot more guests. We're obviously going to follow the Marjorie Taylor Greene motion to vacate because I think once that gets pulled, the Democrats have said that they're backing her. Backing him and going to save him. But what is this going to do to the dynamic? How many votes? There's going to be a motion to table. How close is it? How many Democrats move over? What does that do to the overall flavor of the conference? I think this is going to be, it's until it happens, you don't know how this is going to affect things. So I just say that because this is going to be a really interesting week. And then Trump back in court next week on this hush money case. And I think that we'll be interested to see how this all plays out. Michael Cohen is who they've basically staked everything on. And they've punched a lot of holes in this guy's testimony. I get that it's New York, but you only need one juror, don't you? Just one. And even if that happens, it's over, done. If that doesn't happen, obviously they'll appeal and this thing will move on. But I just, anyway. So as I said, Lara Trump's coming up. Now, I want to ask her a lot of stuff, obviously, about her job as co-chair, what they're doing, and then how they're going to win. Like, you guys have heard this over and over again. These battleground states, there's 7 of them. The Biden campaign gets a lot of discussion in the media for all the money they've raised. But at the end of the day, the money only matters if you do the right things with it. Right? We don't need a huge advertising campaign. It's not like anyone's like, well, who's Donald Trump? What does he believe? Gosh, who's this guy, Joe Biden, that's only been in politics for a half a century? Oh, yeah, the guy on the stairs. I remember him. You don't need that. This is really going to get spent largely on the ground, hiring people to knock on your door over and over and over again. And I think I've told you guys this. If you don't want people to knock on your door, call you at home and mail you, then vote early. Once you do that, they'll stop. Trust me, they don't want to waste the resources going after you over and over and over again. So, but that's what's going to happen. And they're going to go after people up until that point to try to get them to register a vote. And then once they do, go, go, go. And you're going to see a huge effort on what they call low propensity voters. What is that? That is somebody who's registered to vote, but maybe hasn't voted in a while, or 1 out of 4 elections, sometimes even 2 out of 4. High propensity voters are people who vote 4 out of 4 times. You don't even need to tell them that it's election day. They can smell it. 3 out of 4 usually constitutes a high propensity voter. But they're going to spend all their money going after the low propensity voters, figuring out what it takes to push them. When I talked about this in 2016, I wrote in my first book, The Briefing, they had this issue that came up with Hillary Clinton where there were a lot of Trump voters that weren't comfortable voting for Trump. And Chris Carr, our political director at the time, did a bunch of focus groups with these folks. And they ended up creating a project they call upshifting the downshifters. And the idea was these were people who should have been traditional Republican voters. They were low propensity voters, but they weren't committed to voting for Trump. And they really just hammered them with a binary choice between Clinton and Trump. Here's the policies of Hillary. Here's the thing. And by like 86%, they voted for Trump. And you're going to see that again this time. There are going to be an effort to just say, here's 4 years of Trump. Here's 4 years of Biden. What are your priorities? And then they're just going to hammer it home until you're sick of hearing it. And you'll see the ads and you'll see. And if you don't live in one of those battleground states, you're going to be like, what election? What's going on here? Maybe the folks in Nebraska too, or Maine too, you'll hear a little, I don't even know that much because the margin's been big enough. And then we'll obviously see if they expand the map. That's going to be the other big thing. But the big things going so far, and I'm going to ask Laura about this, I'll react afterwards, is the Trump campaign yesterday put out a statement on the debates. And I want to just read this to you right now. It says, the Presidential Debate Commission schedule does not begin until after millions of Americans will have already cast their ballots. This is unacceptable. And by refusing to move up the debates, they are doing a grave disservice to the American public who deserves to hear from both candidates before voting begins. President Trump has stated he will debate Joe Biden anytime, anywhere, anyplace. And Joe Biden himself just agreed to the debate. That was in his hard-hitting interview with Howard Stern, in case you missed that one. Yeah, he's done Smartless, the podcast with Jason Bateman, and then Howard Stern. Man, this guy, he goes and does all the tough ones. He goes on to say, we are committed to making this happen with or without the Presidential Debate Commission. We extend an invitation to every television network in America that wishes to host a debate, and we once again call on Joe Biden's team to work with us to set up one as soon as possible. The American people deserve it. That was signed by Chris LaCivita and Susie Wiles, the two senior advisors to the campaign, the de facto co-campaign managers. I'll ask Laura about this because the interesting thing is the RNC has been out there saying that they didn't want to deal with the Presidential Commission. And now the Trump campaign is saying, hey, we'll do it, but you got to move up the dates. And they're right. These things don't start until mid-September, and millions of people have started to vote weeks before that. Then the next debate is until October. The debate commission is a racket. It's a corporate racket, folks. I'll talk about that after the interview with Laura because I want to get to this. But just understand that this is ridiculous what's happening. Anyway, I want to tell you about two of the great sponsors, as I do every time, that help keep the show free across all of our platforms: Rumble, YouTube, Spotify. And remember to subscribe because, let's face it, as we get close to the election, you need to worry about having these things shadow banned. So if you're subscribing on Rumble, then at least if it gets shadow banned on YouTube or Apple, whatever, then you've got multiple sources. You can always watch us on the First Television Network at 7 p.m., DirecTV. Channel 347, you can watch us on Pluto, Roku, all those places, Samsung Television that the First airs on. But it also helps us, just selfishly, the more you subscribe to all those places, the better. You don't need to watch it on 4 places, I get it. But please take a moment and subscribe. It really helps us show some of the sponsors who've been so great to us that there's a lot of interest in the show. So thank you for doing that and for spreading the word, especially as you go into the weekend. I mean, you got a little extra time, don't you? Anyway, let's hear from two of them. And then on the backside, the co-chair of the Republican National Committee, Lara Trump. If at the end of the day you have aching feet, I know what you're going through. You're on your feet all day long. The folks at Gravity Defyer Shoes have created the perfect solution. They've used a combination of technology and orthotics to put together the perfect shoe for you. So at the end of the day, those aching feet are no more. So every pair of gravity defying shoes comes with orthotics. And if you've had foot problems, you know how important orthotics are to your footwear. Plus, they use Verso technology in every pair. That's the same kind of shock absorbing technology that's in a trampoline. So that takes that shock out of the heel. The shoes also help with your posture, meaning that you're taking a lot of the weight off of those key muscle groups. And at the end of the day, you feel a lot better than you probably do right now. The key, if you're looking to find this solution, is to go to gdefy.com and you can enter code SPICER30. That's going to get you $30 off any order of $150 or more. Trust me when I say that at the end of the day, if you've had feet problems, if you feel achy and tired, Gravity Defyer shoes are the solution. So use code SPICER30 and go to gdefy.com and save $30 off any order of $150 or more. If you're an animal lover, then you know about my friend Leo Grillo. I've been talking about him for several months on the show. Leo Grillo founded Delta Rescue. And if you go to deltarescue.org, you can see the amazing work that Leo has done with Delta Rescue. He has created a no-kill sanctuary for life for these animals. Now, you didn't notice I didn't say shelter because it's a sanctuary. It's where they can live forever. They get veterinarian care. They get nutrition. They can roam free. It's fantastic. But Delta Rescue completely relies on our contribution. So if you can make any kind of contribution, $50, $100, $1,000, it helps Leo keep the mission of Delta Rescue going. But even more so, if you are an animal lover, if you've rescued a dog or a cat or a horse or anyone else, and you realize how important something like this is, the work of Delta Rescue needs to go on. So yes, look at the videos on deltarescue.org. But if you can, go to the estate planning package and see if you can make Delta Rescue part of your estate to make sure that Delta Rescue is an enduring mission that carries on for years and years to come. Thank you. Lara, good to see you. Thanks for being with us.
You got it. Thank you, Sean.
All right. I am a big believer that the Commission on Presidential Debates is a corporate racket. The RNC took some steps a while ago to pull out of them. They didn't really seem to care. Your father-in-law, President Trump, had his team put out a statement saying, we want to participate. We've challenged Joe. But these debates are ridiculous because they happen much later than people are actually voting.
Yeah.
People are voting earlier and earlier. So what is the solution that either you guys are trying to broker or that you're advising the campaign to broker so that there will be debates?
Yeah, I mean, we have to have debates. Look, you have a unique opportunity as an American right now to actually compare two presidencies and two presidents. And really, Sean, we haven't ever had an opportunity like this. And I think whenever you consider these two men and their ability to lead our country and be the leader of the free world, we need to see them standing side by side on a stage. I think it's pretty clear that Joe Biden and his team are terrified of the prospect of this, right? Because, I mean, this guy can't even get through a teleprompter speech. You know, when it's written out for him in big letters, he reads the word pause. I mean, it's a disaster left, right, and center.
Imagine what we can do next. 4 more years. Pause. 4 more years. Pause. 4 more years.
So it's a problem for them because whenever you put Joe Biden up on a stage, period, it's problematic. But compare him to Donald Trump and his wit and his ability and how sharp he is. And, you know, the ability they're going to have to talk about their presidencies. We need that as a country. So we have said from the RNC, look, not only do we want more debates, and we have to have debates, but we want them, as you just pointed out, sooner. The reality is, if you look at the debate schedule right now, the first debate is scheduled for the middle of September. Millions of people, Sean, are going to already have voted because the first day of early voting starts at the beginning of September in a lot of states. You need the ability to compare these two men, their presidencies, their vision for the future of this country on a stage in real time with no buffer of the media, with no people surrounding you as you're walking to Marine One. You need the cold, hard truth here. And so we're pushing very hard from our end. You probably saw that we had a whole host of networks saying, listen, we want this too. They all signed a letter that went to the Biden campaign and the Biden team saying we want debates and we think it's imperative for the future of this country. So we're pushing, apparently, according to the Howard Stern show, we had to get this information from Joe Biden, I guess, is open to it.
Can I tell you a fantasy I had? I don't know if you're going to debate your opponent.
I am somewhere. I don't know when. I'm happy to debate him.
Strategically, they're going to do two things, I think. One is either completely cop out and say, Donald Trump doesn't deserve, he's defeating democracy.
Right.
Okay. One, but they're less so because of what you just highlighted, he said on Howard Stern, of all places. But secondly, I think that they may cop out by agreeing to the Commission on Presidential Debates. And then I get that you want more and you want them earlier. And I agree with you. And as I said, beyond that, I think the Commission on Presidential Debates is a major racket. That all aside, if they sort of call your bluff and say, we agree to the Presidential Debate Commission 3 debates, what's the play going to be?
Well, certainly we're going to continue to push to move the debates forward. I mean, I think as soon as you have these conventions wrap up, it would be a great opportunity to have the Republicans say their side of things, the Democrats show their version of events, and then for us to sit these two men or stand them rather on a stage together and say this is when we're going to talk about the problems one on one. We're going to push for that. We're going to continue to beat this drum because I do think it is so important. You know, you look at our country, Sean, and we really, there are a lot of people who say we should have one day of voting. It should be election day. We should have paper ballots. We should have voter ID. And I believe we could see a day like that again where we get back there. But the system has changed and it's no longer an election day. It's an election season, months on end of voting that occur. And so we have to alter the way we operate as well. And, you know, these debates should also be moved up earlier. We are going to continue to talk about this. We're going to continue to push for it, because I do think it is so important for people to see this. You look at places like Pennsylvania, for example, in that Senate race between Dr. Oz and John Fetterman. How many Pennsylvanians had already voted before that one single debate between those two men? And then you saw them on the stage and it was a complete disaster for Fetterman. But enough people, Sean, had already voted that it really didn't make a difference at that point. Their vote was already cast and it was already done. And so that is why it is so important to get these two men on a stage, to have them debate and have them do it as soon as possible.
And I agree with you. First of all, on everything you said, 100%. I don't think that the Biden team, for all the reasons you laid out, gets this. They can't get the guy not only up the short stairs, but you alluded to it. They now have to gather around him and form a circle to show him going to Marine One because they don't want everyone looking at him. I get it. That's why I believe. So anyway, I'll be fascinated to see how this goes because they're not going to do anything to continue to highlight him. I know this is not something I would have expected to ask you, but obviously rampant speculation on who President Trump is thinking about choosing for his vice president. That aside, which, I mean, obviously we're all going to have to wait to see who he chooses. You have been well noted for how much time and effort you have put into the cause of animal welfare. This has been something that you have done yeoman's work caring for dogs and other animals, raised a ton of money, brought a lot of light to the cause. Just give me your reaction to what Kristie Noem wrote in her book.
I just think it's such a shame, Sean. You know, for me, as you noted, it's for my entire life. I've done a lot of work with rescue organizations, with trying to ensure that our those that depend on us. And I think, you know, you can look at animals as some of those that depend on us the most in this country. The right thing is done for them. And I'll just note very quickly for the audience that something we've seen in the animal rescue community right now is that dog and cat euthanization rates since Joe Biden took office have increased somewhere in the neighborhood of tenfold. And it is because people cannot afford to keep their dogs and cats. They're, you know, these are members of our family. So, you know, talk to people all across the country and they'll say, my dog and my cat, this is a member of my family, but they're having to make these hard decisions right now because we have such poor leadership at the top, because life is so much harder for people. So yeah, obviously, whenever I heard about this situation that Kristie Noem wrote in her book, I kind of had to ask myself, why wouldn't you seek out another alternative? I always want to encourage people out there, if you're looking for a pet, please rescue. You could have taken that dog to a dog rescue, an animal rescue somewhere, given it to another family who maybe doesn't have kids and isn't worried about a dog that may be a little high strung. I thought it was a shame, but then again, look, you can never put yourself in someone's shoes after the fact. People make decisions all the time. I understand she notes this as a very tough decision. I do think there was probably a better alternative. I certainly would have taken a different route. But that was her decision. And then it was her decision to write about it and publicize it, which I think a lot of people find very confusing.
That's the second part, which is I'm like, you chose, it's one thing if it was like a hit piece. You chose to put this in a book anyway. Let me ask you a question. I was there in the first term when your sister-in-law and your brother-in-law, Jared and Ivanka, took a role. I obviously think that your father-in-law is going to win. There'll be a second Trump term. Would you want to serve in it?
Oh my gosh. Well, they make it so nice for all of us Trumps in Washington, D.C., Sean, as you know. Look, I've heard the horror stories, quite frankly, from Jared and Ivanka about what they had to endure, what their entire family had to go through. They had very young kids at the time. I have a 4 and a 6-year-old. You would be hard pressed to convince me to move my family from Florida, where we have a great life, where it's a good quality of life. My kids are in good schools and, we have it all set up nicely down here, up to the belly of the beast in Washington, D.C. That would be a heavy lift. However, what I will say is that I never imagined I would find myself as the co-chair of the RNC if you would have asked me years ago.
So that's
as
not
well.
a no. It's not
a
no.
no. I think that under the right circumstances, if I thought I could be a positive change somewhere, I would never say no, but I'm very happy in Florida right now.
Well, obviously, your father-in-law thought quite enough of your political skills to support you for this role. Let's get on to that. I think the first thing I want to ask you about is a story that came out in CNN with respect to battleground staffing. I think we can all agree that this election pretty much is going to get run in 7 key battleground states. Obviously, I think there's a lot of hope that the map gets expanded, but for the sake of conversation, the 7 battleground states are where it's at. And this is going to be a get out the vote effort, knocking on doors, dragging people to the polls, getting them to cast early votes, committing to vote on election day, whatever it is. CNN's got a story out that the Biden campaign has opened 24 offices in Pennsylvania, 30 in Michigan, 44 in Wisconsin, and that they're really putting a lot of money into their ground game, into open offices. What's the RNC / Trump campaign strategy to put boots on the ground in those battleground states?
Well, look, you are going to see a lot of us in those states, and make no mistake about it. It's we're doing things from a typical campaign perspective, like you just alluded to. We're going to have offices, we're going to have boots on the ground, people on the ground, but we are looking at things a little bit differently this election cycle, Sean. We have never really fully embraced, I don't think, our grassroots partners out there. And these are people like the Scott Preslers of the world. And this is a guy who has done an incredible job at voter registration. So any way we can legally partner with groups like his, and there are many of them out there who do this great work, who really work closely with the people and communities all across these battleground states, we're going to do that. Not only is that impactful when you talk about door knocking and engaging with low propensity voters who we have to get to come out and vote in this election, it's also very important when we talk about legal ballot harvesting, which is something we also are focusing on, which we never have from the RNC this election cycle. We're going to have to play the game a little bit differently if we want to get a leg up on the Democrats. We know that they do things, I'll put it nicely, differently. I'll put that in air quotes. And so we're going to have to adapt as well. And I think that's what you're going to see out of this RNC and this Trump campaign. And I'll also note that in years past, this is my 3rd presidential election. Shocking to say, Sean, I know, because I don't look a day over 15, but 3rd time around, what I'll say is that in the first 2 elections I was a part of, we always worked alongside the RNC as the Trump campaign, but we were never fully integrated. We are one cohesive team right now. That means we have one person doing one job for both organizations. We are not wasting any money. All of the money and all of the resources we have are going to our ground game, our get out the vote efforts, and our protect the vote efforts. I think that is highly important in this election as well. We can never repeat 2020. Everybody knows that they had a lot of questions after that election that never got answered. We are ensuring voter integrity, election integrity this cycle. It is something that I think we're putting the most emphasis on right now at the RNC. We have an entire division dedicated solely to this cause right now at the RNC. And so I think people will notice that as we head on to, what will be the main campaign starting really after the summer months. And so, yeah, obviously we're doing it all in the battleground states as we normally would. And I'm sure as the Biden team is doing as well. But you're going to see some differences from the RNC as well.
And we've had Scott on the show a few times. I saw a picture that you guys posted. He's got to be ecstatic. Have you guys formalized anything with him to utilize his efforts?
Yeah, well, like I said, he has his own organization,
Right,
which he's built over the past several years, and he's very proud of it. And he's done a lot of work to get that up and running. And then obviously from the RNC perspective, we have our own apparatus. So there's nothing formal, so to speak of, but we are combining forces in every legal way we can. And we're doing
it's
that.
so funny though, but the funny thing is the guy was ignored. He is a patriot that wants to help grow the movement, and he couldn't get a call returned. And the funny thing was, and this is when I knew, obviously, I've known you for a while. I knew you were going to do a great job. But one of the first things you did is you embraced him. And it was like, dude, this guy wants to help us and he can't even get a call returned. And it just showed me, it was like, boom, business as usual is over.
Yeah, well, and you have to think, you have to do that. You have to adapt. You have to, sometimes having fresh eyes on a situation or in an organization is good. And so for me, I've known Scott for a long time. I've always been very impressed with his work. And I say, if you're on our team and your goal is to win, we want you on alongside of us. We want to work with you. And so that's what we're doing from the RNC and the Trump campaign, not just with Scott, but with a lot of different groups out there. And I think we'd be crazy not to, quite frankly, Sean.
Losing power is no fun, but unfortunately, so many of us have experienced that. Sometimes it's a natural disaster. Sometimes it's a pole that got hit down. And even more nowadays, they're warning about attacks on our electrical grid. So if you are out of power for an hour, maybe a day, a week, maybe a month or more, would you be ready? Now, I know I am. I have a Patriot Power Generator 2000X that I have in my house. And if you look at the video, it's literally in my house. I have it in my kitchen. I'm running an air fryer, a computer, all of these things, my phone, but you could run even your full refrigerator on the Patriot Power Generator 2000X. It's portable, so you could bring it anywhere. If a family member or a friend was in trouble, you could bring it to them. It can go in your house, as I'm showing you right there. There's no gas. There's no fumes. It runs off solar panels that come free with it. It's powered by the sun. How great is that? No fumes in your house, no noise in your house, no cords getting streamed out. The Patriot Power Generator 2000X is exactly what you need when the power goes out. Now, we know we don't want that to happen, but the odds are that it's going to happen, and you need to be ready like I am. Get the Patriot Power Generator 2000X right now by going to 4patriots.com/Spicer, 4patriots.com/Spicer, and be ready when an emergency comes your way. I've told people all along, the purity test stuff kills me. If you just decided today when you woke up that you're with Donald Trump and you realize that he's got the right policies to move this, you're on the team. I don't like this whole idea of how long have you been here, to me is insane. We need more voters that recognize the country's in the wrong direction and Donald Trump's got the right policies.
Yeah, you're exactly right. If you're on the team starting right now, this minute, then you're on the team. And we want you and we want to work with you and we want you to be a part of this. And I always say that. I mean, look, that's part of the goal of the RNC as well. We've got to expand the tent. We have to embrace people. We have to welcome people in, and we can't shut anybody out. We don't want to do that. In fact, you look at what did Donald Trump do when he was stuck in a Manhattan courtroom? He went up to Harlem. Yeah. He went up there to a bodega and was embraced by people. When he had to be in Atlanta, he went to a Chick-fil-A and was embraced. Look out for more of that coming out of this campaign cycle with Donald Trump. You are going to see him in Detroit, in Chicago, in Atlanta, in Philadelphia, places where Republican candidates never visit. Look out for Donald Trump there, and look out for big stuff coming out of New York City as well. I won't say any more than that, but we're going to have something very big, Sean, coming soon.
See, that's why I love it, because that's exactly what we need to do. Go to places we haven't gone before. He surprises people where he goes. And, you know, I was going to ask you about this, but you basically answered the question. I mean, the Biden campaign is bleeding support from minorities, particularly black men. And here's Donald Trump showing up in Harlem, showing up at a Chick-fil-A in an urban area in Atlanta. As you said, you know, hopefully just now they're going to Detroit. That's what we need more of. These people have been dismayed with Biden's policies, and we can give them an alternative if we show up and ask for their vote.
Yeah. And by the way, the support that Joe Biden is losing with black voters, with Hispanic voters, with young voters as well. And we're looking at them very heavily too from the perspective of the campaign and the RNC. We have to capitalize on that. It is never too late to change your mind and to realize that the policies for which you have been voting, if you've been voting Democrat, are not working for you. That's our job. Our job is to get out there, talk to people, engage with people, tell them the truth about this party, because they've been told a lot of lies, Sean. And so The great news is we have a candidate in Donald Trump who does it all for us. He gets people energized. He gets people paying attention. And that's when we have to get in there and we have to say, hey, you can come over and vote for this team and it'll make your life better. It'll make this country safer. It'll make us the superpower of the world once again. And who doesn't want that? So we're going to be doing a lot of that in the coming months as well.
There's something that we used to call orphan districts, right? So I mentioned the 7 battleground states, but you've got a lot of congressional districts like in New York, in California, et cetera, that aren't part of a battleground thing, but are key to keeping the majority in the House and picking it up in the Senate. What is the plan to work with the other committees and to make sure that those orphan districts in states are funded?
Yeah, well, listen, we're from the RNC. That's part of our job as well. Obviously, the main job is get our guy Donald Trump elected as the 47th president. But we also want to make sure that we expand our lead in the House and we take back the Senate. So you're exactly right. We have to pay very close attention to these races across the country, and anywhere where they need a little help, monetarily or otherwise from the RNC. That's our job. We're there to do that. But I think the great news too, when you look at a candidate like Donald Trump, is he's going to help all of these down ballot races. The mistake the Democrats have made, perhaps in their lawfare against Donald Trump and in keeping him in the state of New York as much as they are right now, is as you talk about some of those key races in states like New York, Donald Trump campaigning there and going out and making, a big ruckus where the Democrats really don't like that. That's going to help those candidates as well. So we have a great team spread out all across this country. We're doing a lot of fundraising. We're doing a lot of events over the next several months, and we're hopeful that that's all going to translate to votes. And again, I don't think you can overstate the effect of Donald Trump at the top of a ticket for all the down ballot races. It's so huge. Right.
Last thing I want to ask you, you've been in the job just a little while. You weren't a creature of politics. You weren't a swamp dweller. What have you learned about Washington and the RNC since you've taken over the job that you didn't know when you took it?
Well, what's been interesting to me, Sean, is interacting with people in DC. And these are people who go on TV and have a lot of nasty things to say about us. And then you probably know this better than anyone. Then they get one-on-one with you. They get it, face to face. They couldn't be nicer. They're lovely. They're very cordial and thoughtful with everything they say. But it kind of just goes to show you that really what a lot of Americans assume about people in Washington, D.C. is sort of true. They kind of are there to be a mouthpiece for oftentimes the people at the top of their party who are deciding how things go. But you know what? Coming over to the RNC has been one of the most incredible things I've done. Again, I said it earlier, but I never would have expected to be in this role and to really be able to do things that I think are not going to just affect change right now for this election cycle, but for years to come and for future elections. That's huge. I'm so honored truly to be in this position, and I take it very seriously. I don't take it lightly at all. I'll tell you, my kids don't love it because I'm not around right now as much as they would like. But I think however long my tenure here as co-chair of the RNC may be, I hope that what I leave is that we have expanded this party, that we have brought more people in, that people have a different view of the Republican Party on the other side of this election and this campaign cycle than maybe they ever had before, and they see it in a very positive way. So I'm working every day towards that, and I'm very proud of the work we've already done alongside the chairman, Michael Whatley. He's a great guy to have at the top of the organization, and we're very lucky to have him.
Well, you certainly have hit the ground running and are getting the right results, and you have the right priorities, and that's what counts. So I couldn't be more happy and more honored that you're in that role. And I really appreciate you spending time to be with us. Thank you so much for being here, and hopefully we'll check back in with you as the campaign progresses.
Oh, thank you, Sean. I really appreciate it.
You bet. All right. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Lara. And you heard me say, I love the energy she brings to this. She called it a fresh set of eyes. But why did it take a fresh set of eyes to meet with a guy like Scott Presler? You guys have seen him. He's been on the show a couple times. This guy's out there busting his butt in places like Pennsylvania to get new people to vote. It's a horrible, horrible time kill to do this, but he's committed to it. I love that. Knocking on doors, asking if they'll register to vote. He is so good at it, so committed on it. And frankly, a lot of people in politics don't want to do that. And he's so committed to this. Why wouldn't we embrace a guy like that? And Lara immediately goes, yep, I'm going to call him and make sure that he understands how much we appreciate his effort and hopefully try to work with him within the confines of the law. Hello. What was so hard about that? Just fire that guy up even more, energize him even more, double down his commitment. That's the attitude we need more of. And I'm glad that she brings that to the fight. I was not surprised by her answer on Kristie Noem. She has been a huge, huge advocate for rescue dogs in particular. She's got like 18 dogs, I think. I'm kidding. but she has been a huge animal lover, a supporter, raises a ton of money for it. She's always doing some kind of event. And so anyway, as you guys have heard me over the week, what I don't understand is it's one thing if you did it. I'm not excusing that by any means, because I agree with Laura on this. Retrain the dog, figure out something. But why would you say it? The passage from her book reads like an opposition research hit that somebody would have found out and sent out to CNN. Instead, CNN literally the other day just read it, the excerpts that The Guardian had from her book. I don't understand that. And I've said this before, and I'll leave it at this, but who on your team read the book and said, Governor, good job. Love the story about killing the dog. Thanks God you threw in the other story about killing the goats and the horses too, because wow, now I can't get enough of killing animals. I just don't understand who looked at that and said, good idea. Anyway, enough of that. Laura was talking about how they're structured. And if you'll just bear with me for a minute, I think that is so important. Because prior to Donald Trump, the way it worked was you have the campaign that can take X amount of dollars. Right now, it's $6,600 of hard federal money. It's what they call it. And then the RNC can take hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I was there in 2012. We had a whole team, communications team, a fundraising team, a political team, and then Mitt Romney had a team. And that's the way it was in McCain and Bush and all the way before that. And you had these two teams side by side. And you would kind of split up some work, but the campaign led the way. And we would generally draft. I would always say as a joke, no offense, but we were like the JV team. But there were two sets of everything. It was stupid. In 2016, that changed because the Trump team didn't have the robust presidential staff that most campaigns did. And we started to integrate. The difference was it was like an arranged marriage. It wasn't perfect. Not everyone's aboard of Donald Trump. I think you've read about that. So it was tough. This time, though, they have the ability to say, let's have one person doing every key job and leading it from the top. You don't need two political directors, two fundraising directors, two comms directors, two press secretaries. You need one. And they talk about what's happening at the top of the ticket down. Think about how smart that is. Efficient. Oh my God. Talk about making sense. And it also makes a lot of financial sense, doesn't it? Think about this. As I said, the RNC can accept a couple $100,000 per person. The campaign can accept $6,600. So let's just say for hypothetical purposes that you hire someone at $100,000, just to keep my math simple. Well, if you had to pay them just from the campaign, you would have to go to 66 times, 15 max out donors to help pay that salary. The RNC could pay one donor, not even one, probably half of a donor, half of a max out donor. So it makes more sense for the RNC to burden a bigger share of the financial burden, doesn't it? It just makes sense. It's smarter. It's more efficient. And remember that when you hear about these fundraising numbers and all that stuff, because it doesn't take into consideration a lot of these variables. So what? You raise more money. How are you spending it? If I'm blowing it all like Hunter Biden style, then you're not necessarily doing smart, efficient things, are you? If you've streamlined everything the way the Trump campaign has, and you have fewer people on the payroll of the campaign draining less resources and more people on the RNC to the side of the house, or what they call the victory side of the house, and they can take bigger donations, it makes more sense. Hello? Those are the small nuances that the media doesn't get, never talks about. But it's the business approach that Trump has to this that makes a lot more sense. And I think that that's important to know. Because you have these discussions and people read these stupid one-line things in CNN or the Washington Post and don't understand how the process works. They've never worked in politics. They pick up things and they write their story. I would spend hours sometimes briefing these guys on the process, the system, the law. They're mostly clueless, just to be clear. And that's what I find so difficult sometimes about reading political stories. They don't understand it. And hopefully, that's what this show brings, is a little bit more of the inside baseball, inside story of how it actually works, what they're actually doing and why. Trump's able to run lean and mean because he knows the RNC can do this. What difference does it make who's knocking on your door? Do you ever say when someone calls you up and says, hey, I'm campaigning on behalf of Donald Trump, well, who pays your salary? Is it coming from the Victory Fund? Is it coming from the RNC? Is it coming from the Trump campaign? You don't care. No one even asked that question. And the Trump campaign has figured that out. Why wouldn't we shift a lot of the financial burden for some of the expensive stuff like personnel onto the RNC? We're all going to do the same thing. Same thing with a lot of the office and the infrastructure. There's ways that you can structure this thing so it makes more financial sense. It's kind of like how Trump approached government in a lot of ways. It's like it brings a business person's approach to this. And there's so many stories where I remember he just doesn't buy into the Washington, this is how it has to be kind of way. This is how it's always been done. As I said, prior to Trump, I was there for Romney. Volunteered during McCain and Bush all the way back. The next campaign would go, oh, well, that's how the last one did it. But it wasn't until Trump that they said, that doesn't make sense. This is stupid. Why would we have two of everything? Does it? So next time you're in a conversation with someone, you could explain that. If Joe Biden's, they don't have that relationship with the DNC because they want it all controlled in Wilmington, Delaware. So there's a duplicity and it costs more money to do it that way. That's fine. They got plenty of it. I'm not telling them how to run their TV, their campaign, but understand that just because you read a headline in the Washington Post about the campaign paid for this and the Trump campaign, it's not a question of who paid for it. Does it exist? If I have 50 people doing something and you have 50 people doing something, who cares who's paying for them? If I have 50 offices and you have 50 offices, again, who cares? But the Washington Post and the New York Times and CNN don't get that. They just don't. So they're going to write a story saying the Trump campaign doesn't have any offices and the Biden campaign has 50. What they're not asking is, does the RNC have 50 offices? Because it doesn't matter who's paying for it. It matters, does it exist? And you heard Laura just talk about that. And I think that was important to understand. The ground game is going to be crucial. I mentioned this, 94 electoral votes in 7 states. This is all going to come down to those people, dragging those people out and getting them to vote. Just remember that. Just as a quick side note, and I want to just say this because she's off air now and I don't need to have her there. I've done a lot of interviews with people who've asked, is Lara Trump the right person for this job? Yeah, she is. She mentioned it. How many other co-chairs of the RNC? Well, first, let's start with this. How many co-chairs can anyone name? Aside from me, because I'm an RNC dork. Seriously. When's the last time? And there's been some great co-chairs. I've worked with a lot of them. I think they're great people. No one's had the name recognition of Lara Trump. No one's requesting the RNC co-chair to do interviews prior to Lara Trump. She can go out there and spread the message. She can raise a ton of money. How many emails have we all gotten so far signed from Lara Trump? Have you ever got one from another RNC co-chair? No. How many people are begging her to do a headline and event? She brings so much to this, and this is now her 3rd presidential campaign. She's got more experience than anyone I've ever known, probably as chairman. And I don't think, again, the media appreciates the role of what the co-chair does. It's kind of like the vice president of the RNC. You work with the president. The duties aren't all spelled out. You do what helps to magnify the role. And in the past, the co-chair's job was to fill in where the chairman couldn't. And then people would say, who's the co-chair? Now they're like, oh my gosh, Lara Trump. And she's got this pipeline straight to the president of the United States. There's no schism. Oh, the RNC said this. You don't think I bet you the president didn't even know who the co-chair was prior to this. I'm kidding. He does. It was Sharon Day. He appointed her an ambassador. She was a great, great woman and great public servant and great party official. But at the end of the day, she goes, great, I'll just call my father-in-law. I'll see him tomorrow night at dinner, whatever it is. But this is such a win for the RNC and for the party. And we've never had anybody like that. She can raise high dollars, low dollars. She can appear on media, headline events. It's awesome. So I just say that. Now, real quick, the RNC is going to be the boots on the ground. They're going to be the army, if you will. The generals are, as I mentioned, Chris LaCivita and Susie Wiles, when I was talking about that debate statement. Those are the 2 senior advisors that are running the show. They're the generals. He doesn't have a traditional campaign manager. He has senior advisors. That's who they are. And then you've got people like Dan Scavino who've been with him forever and run that social media platform, all of his platforms. And Dan does a killer job doing it. He's been with him forever. First campaign, White House, second campaign, now 3rd. And then you've got Jason Miller, who's with him on that first campaign. Stephen Chung, who I sat near on the first campaign. They're there running the nucleus of the communications effort, along with now Caroline Levitt and Danielle Alvarez, who was at the RNC and then got brought on board. They got a strong, strong inner circle team. And they got a lot of Army, a lot of the soldiers out there now, especially at the RNC doing the job. Those are the names that you need to know. Anyway, there's a lot going on with respect to that I wanted to make sure you knew. I know that's inside baseball, but hopefully because it's the weekend, you have a little bit of time to digest it and share it and get ahead of the curve. Next week, as I mentioned, though, we've got Victor Davis Hanson. He's going to be here. Kimberly Guilfoyle, another one of the family members, or soon to be. Anyway, a huge weekend coming up. I hope you have some time this weekend. Thank you for everything you do to spread the word on the show, to share it. We continue to grow, and it's because of you. So thank you for that. I hope you have a great weekend. Please continue to subscribe on YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Watch it on the First if you can, channel 347 on DirecTV. Have a great weekend. We'll see you back here on Monday on The Sean Spicer Show. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.